Threat confirmed. Activate all systems. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Engage thrusters.
The shadow that ate the sun. They came on a Thursday morning without any warning at all. No signals, no sensor ghosts, no preliminary radiation bursts that Earth's monitoring stations might have caught and puzzled over for a few hours before understanding. One moment, the sky was clear. The next, it was not. 12 ships hung above the planet, each one vast enough to block a continent's worth of sunlight, their dark hulls etched with luminescent markings that pulsed like slow heartbeats. Behind them, spreading outward like a net being drawn around a fish, another 3,000 vessels arranged themselves in patient, geometric silence. Dr. Nadia Okafor was in the middle of her second cup of coffee at the Global Space Monitoring Station when the alarms began. She had worked at the station for 19 years and had never heard more than 2 alarms go off simultaneously. All of them going off at once produced a sound she would describe later as the building having a cardiac event. She ran to the main display and stood there for a long moment, trying to make what she was seeing fit into some category of experience she already possessed. It did not fit. "How many?" she asked the technician beside her, a young man whose face had gone the color of old paper. "Best count is 3,200 total," he said. They appeared instantaneously. No approach vector, no warning. The message came through everything simultaneously. Every radio frequency, every broadcast network, every personal device on the planet. A voice like boulders grinding together, translated into every human language at once. "People of Earth, I am Supreme Commander Vale Drow of the Hegemony of Zekai. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. For 10,000 years, we have brought civilization to 600 worlds. We offer you the same terms we have offered every species we have encountered. Surrender your weapons, dissolve your military, accept our governance. In return, you receive peace, order, and our protection." A pause, weighted with the confidence of 10 millennia of unbroken conquest. Those who have refused this offer no longer exist. Consider that carefully. In the emergency command center beneath the Swiss Alps, General Yusuf Adeyemi listened to the broadcast with his arms folded and his jaw set in the particular way that his staff had learned to recognize as the expression he wore when he had already made a decision and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. He was 63 years old, built like a man who had spent his entire life carrying things, with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen most of what the world could produce and remained unimpressed. Around the table sat the leaders of every major nation, their faces showing varying degrees of shock. Adeyemi's face showed none. He had been preparing for this meeting his entire career, though he had expected it to happen somewhat differently. President Amara Diallo of the United Earth Defense Council looked at Adeyemi across the table. She was 58, a former international lawyer with a philosopher's habit of examining every angle of a problem before speaking, and a politician's understanding of when to stop examining and start acting. "General," she said quietly, "your assessment." "They are expecting us to be afraid," Adeyemi said. "They are expecting the sight of that fleet to do most of their work for them. Every species they have ever conquered has seen those ships and lost the will to resist before a single shot was fired." He paused. "We are going to disappoint them." President Diallo nodded slowly. Then she walked to the communication panel and opened the channel to the fleet above. "Supreme Commander Vale Drow," she said, her voice carrying the calm of someone who had argued cases before international tribunals and lost, and gone back the next day and argued again. "We have received your offer. We have considered it. Our answer is no." The silence that followed was long enough to have texture. When Vale Drow spoke again, the grinding boulder voice carried a new note, something almost like confusion. Perhaps the translation was imperfect. "We are offering your species the opportunity to continue existing." "We understood you perfectly," General Adeyemi said, taking the microphone. "Our answer remains no." Another silence. "No species," Vale Drow said slowly, "has ever refused after seeing our fleet." Then, President Diallo replied, "You have been dealing with the wrong species. You have 72 hours to reconsider leaving." 30 years of patience. In an underground facility beneath the Colorado mountains, Dr. Nadia Okafor arrived 6 hours after the broadcast, having been transported there by a military escort that had appeared at her station with orders signed at the highest level. The facility stretched for miles underground, its corridors humming with the sound of machines that had been running in secret for 3 decades. She had spent her career monitoring space for exactly the kind of signal that had arrived this morning, but nothing in her career had prepared her for what she found inside Project Darkfall. Colonel Reina Vasquez met her at the main gate. Vasquez was 44 years old, compact and precise in her movements, with the focused energy of someone who had been waiting a very long time for a specific moment and had just watched it arrive. "Dr. Okafor," she said, extending her hand, "we have been hoping you would join us. Your signal analysis work on the recovered probe Ada was instrumental in designing our communication interception systems." Okafor shook the hand, still looking around at the facility with the expression of someone revising their entire understanding of recent history. "How long has this been here?" she asked. Vasquez smiled. "This particular facility opened 31 years ago. The program began 33 years ago, after a damaged alien scout ship came down in the Nevada desert. Not the story you have heard, the real one. The real story, as Vasquez explained it during the walk through the facility's main corridor, was this. The crashed ship had contained a data core. The data core contained detailed records of the hegemony of Zekai, their history, their conquered worlds, their tactics, their technology, and crucially, their failures. Every species that had ever tried to resist the hegemony had failed, but the records of those failures contained something the hegemony had apparently never noticed, a pattern. Every resistant species had made the same mistake, meeting overwhelming force with force, fighting the enemy's chosen battle on the enemy's chosen terms. The humans had read those records very carefully and decided to fight a completely different battle entirely. 6,000 combat vessels in this facility alone, Vasquez said, gesturing through a blast-proof window at a hangar that seemed to extend beyond the reach of the overhead lights. The ships inside were black, genuinely black, not painted, but constructed from materials that absorb light rather than reflecting it. They looked like cuts made in reality itself, holes in the shape of weapons. 12 facilities like this one on Earth, 3,000 more ships in the lunar construction yards, deep space assets stationed throughout the local stellar neighborhood. She glanced at Okafor. We have had ships operating in nearby star systems for 15 years, exploring, mapping, and positioning. Okafor stopped walking. We have been out there for 15 years and no one knows? Everyone in this building knows, Vasquez said pleasantly. And now you know. Welcome to the other history of the human race, Doctor. General Adeyemi arrived at the facility that evening and found Okafor in the Tactical Operations Center, surrounded by data displayers and firing questions at analysts who were struggling to keep up. He watched her work for a moment before approaching. I need your expertise, he told her. The psychological profile of the hegemony Imian structure, specifically what they will do when the unexpected happens. Okafor turned from the display. You have 30 years of their records. You know them better than I do. I know their tactics, Adeyemi said. You understand why they developed those tactics. There is a difference. He gestured to a chair. The 72 hours they gave us is a gift. They think they are being merciful. We think they are giving us time to finish getting into position. What will they do when they discover the fleet they expected to find cowering is the bait in a trap? Okafor thought about this for a long moment. She had spent her career studying the signals that intelligent life might send across space, which meant she had spent her career thinking about what different kinds of minds considered important enough to broadcast. They will not believe it at first, she said. 10,000 years of unopposed conquest creates a specific cognitive pattern. When something contradicts the pattern, the first response is always to find an explanation that preserves the pattern. They will decide we are bluffing, or insane, or too primitive to understand our own situation. She paused. The moment they cannot find that explanation is the moment they become dangerous. That is when they stop trying to conquer and start trying to annihilate. Adeyemi nodded. That is exactly what I needed to know. How long do we have before they reach that moment? 12 hours into the battle, she said. Maybe less. Then we make sure the battle is over in 10. The shadow that ate the sun. The hegemony bombardment began exactly 72 hours after their ultimatum, a beam of concentrated energy from the flagship positioned above North America, capable of vaporizing a mountain range, striking Earth's planetary shield, and bouncing off without leaving a mark. Supreme Commander Vale Dro stared at his tactical display in silence for several seconds. His weapons officer fired again, full power from all 3,000 ships at once. For 10 minutes, enough energy to destroy a small moon hammered against Earth's defenses. The shields held without flickering. Sir, his tactical officer said carefully, the humans appear to have planetary shielding technology that exceeds our own. Vale Dro had been in military service for 280 years. In that time, he had encountered many things that surprised him.
What he felt now was not surprise. It was the specific, stomach-dropping sensation of understanding that he had made a serious mistake. The human ships appeared without warning, not approaching from a distance, not rising from Earth's surface, simply materializing out of empty space in every direction simultaneously, as though the darkness itself had decided to take sides. They were smaller than Hegemony vessels, sleek and absolutely black, moving with an agility that Vaildrow's tactical doctrine had no category for. His sensors could not count them accurately. The jamming was too thorough. Thousands, his sensor officer reported, her voice carrying the specific flatness of someone suppressing panic through professionalism. Possibly more.
Colonel Vasquez commanded the lead assault wing from the bridge of the Shadowblade, one of 600 vessels that had launched from the Colorado facility within the past hour. She watched the Hegemony fleet on her tactical display with the focused attention of someone who had been studying this exact formation in simulations for 11 years. "All wings, hunt Protocol 7, she said over the quantum communication network, which the Hegemony could neither detect nor jam. "Target engines and communication arrays. Disable only. Nobody fires to destroy unless I give the specific order." The Black Armada did not fight like any military force the Hegemony had ever encountered, because it had not been designed to fight like any military force the Hegemony had ever encountered. Every tactic had been developed specifically around the knowledge that the enemy had never faced an opponent who studied them in advance. The Hegemony ships tried to form defensive lines. The human vessels split around them, attacked from angles that the defensive lines did not cover, and vanished before return fire could find them. When the alien fleet turned to address one group of attackers, another group appeared behind them. Precise particle beams sliced through sensor clusters. Ion cannons overloaded communication systems without touching hull integrity. Electromagnetic pulse warheads shut down weapons and navigation while leaving life support completely untouched. Within 3 hours, over half the Hegemony fleet was floating blind and helpless in space, their crews alive and unharmed and absolutely unable to do anything about their situation. It was a kind of defeat that Hegemony military doctrine did not have a name for because it had never happened before. Dr. Okafor monitored the psychological data from the captured Hegemony communications in the operations center on Earth, tracking the emotional state of the alien crews through intercepted internal broadcasts. "Panic is setting in," she reported to Adeyemi. "They are not receiving the coherent tactical response you would expect from experienced military personnel. The confusion is deeper than tactical. They are experiencing a foundational disorientation." She looked at her display. They genuinely cannot process what is happening to them. Their entire identity as a military force is built on the assumption that they are the most advanced power in the galaxy. That assumption is being removed in real time. Adeyemi watched the battle display. "How long before the command structure fragments?" "It already has," Okafor said. "Vaildrow is no longer receiving coherent reports from his fleet commanders. Each of them is responding to his own local situation because no one has a picture of the whole battle." She paused. "This is the moment, General. This is when you talk to him." General Adeyemi opened the channel to Vaildrow's flagship himself. "Supreme Commander," he said, "I believe your situation has changed considerably in the past few hours." A long pause. When Vaildrow spoke, the grinding boulder voice had lost most of its architecture. It sounded like a structure after the foundations had been removed. "What are you?" he asked. It was not a tactical question. It was something older and more fundamental. "We are the species you came to conquer," Adeyemi replied. "We are also the species that spent 30 years studying everything you have ever done so that we would be ready when you arrived. You made one significant error, Supreme Commander." "Tell me." "You assumed that primitive technology meant primitive thinking. Those are not the same thing." Adeyemi explained the terms simply. Unconditional surrender of the fleet, crews treated according to human standards of prisoner welfare and eventually repatriated, ships examined and decommissioned, and one additional requirement. Vaildrow would carry a message personally back to Hegemony High Command. What message? That Earth is not a conquest, that humanity has declared its independence, and that any future attempt to change that will not be met with defense. It will be met with the full offensive capacity of the Black Armada. Another long silence. "You cannot threaten the Hegemony." "Supreme Commander," Adeyemi said, "look at your tactical display. Then look at the positions of our deep space assets throughout your territory. We have been operating inside your space for 15 years. We know where every significant Hegemony installation is located. We know your defensive configurations, your supply routes, your communication networks." He let that sit for a moment. "We have not been hiding because we were afraid of you. We have been hiding because we were not ready yet. We are ready now." The reinforcement fleet arrived 4 hours later, 5,000 additional Hegemony vessels under Fleet Commander Thalavex, who had been dispatched from the core systems when Vaildrow's initial reports arrived. Thalavex was a methodical commander, experienced and cautious, and she had spent the transit time reading every word of those reports with growing unease.
The humans had not behaved like any species in Hegemony records. They had refused when they should have surrendered, they had fled when they should have fled, and now, as her fleet entered the outer solar system, her sensors were showing her something that made her methodical mind go very quiet and still. The system was not defended, it was occupied. Human vessels were everywhere, thousands of them, moving in patterns that her tactical algorithms could not parse into any recognizable doctrine. Dr. Okafor was the one who spoke to Thalavex. Adeyemi had suggested it after reviewing the fleet commander's psychological profile from the recovered records. She is not like Veildrow, Okafor had explained. He was built by easy victories. She was built by difficult ones. She already suspects something was wrong. She will listen if you approach her as a peer rather than a defeated enemy. Okafor opened the channel and introduced herself not as a military officer but as a scientist. Fleet Commander Vex, my name is Dr. Nadia Okafor. I am an astronomer. 6 months ago I was drinking coffee and listening for signals from space. I mention this because I want you to understand that the people you are dealing with are not primarily warriors. We are curious, we are stubborn, and we study things obsessively until we understand them. A pause. We have been studying your empire for 30 years. We know it better than many of your own officers do. Thalavex listened. Then she asked one question. What do you want? Okafor looked at Adeyemi across the operations room. He nodded. We want you to go home, she said. We want you to tell your high command exactly what you found here. Not a report designed to minimize the disaster. The truth. Because the truth is the only thing that gives your empire a chance to make a different decision before we have to make it for you. Another silence. And if our high command does not listen? Then, Okafor said, with a gentleness that somehow made the words more serious rather than less, the Black Armada will help them listen.
What comes after? The hegemony of Zakai did not collapse immediately. Empires built across 10,000 years do not simply stop one morning because they lost a battle, but they collapse eventually, and the mechanism of this one's collapse was something no military planner had expected: the liberated worlds. As human ships moved through former hegemony territory over the following months, they did not conquer. They did not install human governors or demand tribute or replace one set of imperial flags with another. They offered assistance, shared technology, and asked one question of every world they visited: what do you want your future to look like? It was a question most of those civilizations had not been permitted to consider for centuries, and the answers, when they began to come, were extraordinary. General Adeyemi retired from active command 8 months after the Battle of Earth at his own request. He was 64 years old and had been running on sustained urgency for 33 years. He told President Diallo that he wanted to sleep for approximately 6 months and then think carefully about what useful things remained to be done. Diallo told him he had earned both. He spent his retirement years writing a book about the philosophy of defensive warfare, which was studied at military academies across 400 worlds for the next century. Its central argument was simple: the most powerful military force is the one that is never used because it has made its existence sufficiently clear that no one tests it. Dr. Okafor did not retire. She had spent her career listening for signals from space and had just received the largest signal in human history. There was more work to do. She took a position on the newly formed Galactic Cooperative's First Contact Advisory Council, where her job was to think carefully about how humanity engaged with species it had not yet met, making sure that the methods used against the hegemony did not become the template for a new kind of arrogance. The most dangerous moment for any civilization, she wrote in a paper that would circulate throughout the cooperative for decades, is the moment it discovers it is the most powerful force in its neighborhood. Every empire in history began with a genuine belief that its power entitled it to make decisions for others. We must be specifically and continuously vigilant against that belief, because it is comfortable, and comfort is how principles die. Thalavex arrived on Earth 13 months after the battle, traveling on a civilian transport under her own name, having resigned her commission in the Hegemony fleet 6 weeks after returning to core Hegemony space. She had delivered the report Okafor asked for. She had told the truth. The High Command had not listened. She had decided that her obligation was to the truth rather than to the command structure, and she had acted accordingly. She found Okafor through the cooperative's public directory and sent a message asking if they might meet. Okafor responded within an hour. They met at a small restaurant near the Global Space Monitoring Station where Okafor had been drinking coffee the morning everything changed. Thalavex was not what Okafor had expected, though she was not certain what she had expected. Someone who looked like an enemy, perhaps. Instead, she found someone who looked like a person who had made difficult decisions and was still working out what they meant. "I read your paper," Thalavex said, after they had been sitting for a few minutes. The one about the most dangerous moment for a civilization. I did not expect it to reach hegemony space so quickly, Okafor said. Former hegemony space, Vex corrected. It is circulating widely. Some find it inspiring, some find it insulting. She looked at her hands. I find it accurate. Why did you come? Okafor asked. Vex was quiet for a moment. Because I commanded the reinforcement fleet and chose not to fight. Because I went home and told the truth and was not believed. Because the empire I served for 40 years is dissolving, and I am not entirely certain that is the wrong outcome. She looked up. I came because I want to understand how you did it. Not the military part. The part after. How do you build something that does not become what you fought against? Okafor considered the question for a long time. Outside the window, ships from a dozen different worlds were visible in the sky above the spaceport, a sight that would have been impossible to imagine a year ago. I am not sure we know yet, she said honestly. We are still building it. Every day is an argument about what it should be. She paused. That is probably the point. The moment everyone agrees and stops arguing is the moment it starts going wrong. Vex looked at her for a moment. Then slowly, she smiled. I think, she said, that I have a great deal to learn. So do we, Okafor said. That is why it is interesting. 5 years after the battle, over 800 worlds had joined the Galactic Cooperative. The hegemony of Zakai existed as a rump government controlling fewer than 30 systems, negotiating the terms of its own eventual dissolution with a patience that suggested its leaders had finally accepted the direction of history. The Black Armada remained the most powerful military force in the known galaxy, and it remained one that had never fired a weapon to conquer. General Adiemi's book was required reading at its academies. Dr. Okafor chaired the First Contact Council. Thala Vex, after 3 years of study and a formal application process, served as the Cooperative's ambassador to the remaining hegemony worlds, a position that required her particular combination of insider knowledge and genuine conversion. She was very good at it. The species that had refused to kneel had built something from that refusal, something that everyone involved understood was fragile and difficult and worth every bit of the effort required to maintain it. Not an empire, not a utopia, just a sustained, argued-over, imperfect, daily choice to be better than the alternative. The stars watched. History recorded, the work continued.